I am very pleased to introduce our moderator, who will also introduce the members of our next panel. Joe Kahn is the Beijing-based correspondent and chief of the New York Times China Bureau, a position he's held since 2002. Joe also won something called the Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting with he and a colleague on their series of stories about China's legal system. And I am pleased to introduce Joe, who will introduce and moderate our panel on the environment. Joe?
Thank you, Bob, for that introduction. And I'm happy to be here, and I'll introduce our panelists in just a moment. You heard quite a bit already about the state of the energy situation, the water situation, the environmental situation in China. I think you'll hear a bit more. So I'm going to confine my introductory comments to just talking a little bit about what might be the challenge facing China if it is genuinely going to go green. We talk a lot about the scale of the problem. We've talked to a large extent, I think, also about the growing recognition of the problem, both in the United States and in China. But what does it require to turn the tide in China on this question? And I think a little bit of historical context is helpful, because we are all well aware now that China is a GDP machine. In fact, its GDP grows so quickly that the central government is unable to ratchet it down. Since 2002, they've had a strategic objective of macroeconomic control, which has continually failed to come even close to its targeted growth levels. The latest quarter growth was 11.1%. Only a few months ago, officials had been saying they were somewhat confident they would be able to keep it below 10%. It's been consistently far over target. Why is China so good or bad at producing very high rates of GDP growth? One of the reasons is that it took about 20 years to change its bureaucratic mentality and institute an almost singular obsession with GDP growth inside its government bureaucracy. It took Deng Xiaoping repeated efforts to get the Communist Party and the government bureaucracy to focus on that particular target above all other targets. And as Doug mentioned in the earlier panel, officials at all levels of the Chinese government are judged first and foremost on what they can do to raise GDP in their particular area of influence. And if you fail to meet your target, or you fail in a relative sense, you will not get promoted in the Chinese system. How do you change something like that? Is it going to require a new Deng Xiaoping to come in and bend the bureaucracy to the goal of protecting the environment? It's a possibility. We don't really know. They've started to talk about in recent years the importance of adding energy conservation and efficiency and pollution controls to that series of targets that officials throughout the bureaucracy need to meet in order to get promoted. But to date, nothing has even begun to compare with GDP. The reason for that is that China has an enormous influx of new workers into its economy every year in excess of 10 million. It has a widespread unemployment problem, and it's facing a giant and long-term transition in the countryside, incorporating hundreds of millions of peasants into the modern economy. And those goals are, to an extent, fundamentally at odds with a lot of what we're talking about and focusing on here today, which is changing the growth model in China to become a green growth model. China is struggling with some of the ideological issues of needing to start to take responsibility for greenhouse gas emissions, pollution problems around the world, emissions of sulfur, mercury, rainfall in the Great Lakes and in parts of California that are emanating from China. at a time when its overall development level is still very low relative to the Western world. In other words, Western environmental concerns and problems from the standpoint of China are being imposed on the country. How do you convince China that it's in its own national interest to take dramatic action on the environment at a time when domestically it is still not close to a top priority? I think that's one of the things our panelists can address in a little bit more detail, and we hope to get some feedback from you as well. Ashok Gupta maybe can start off by giving us a little bit of an overview of what he sees as the leading environmental problems, and then we'll go to the other two panelists. I was asked, first of all, if you have questions, please write them down, and we can start asking them as soon as we collect some. Secondly, we have a deadline of 5 o'clock to leave this room, so we have to pretty much stick to our time schedule. Each of the panelists will initially talk for 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to questions.
Maybe I'll go up there. Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by thanking Ling, of course, since she asked me to do this. And I'm not sure exactly why I was asked, since we have other experts here, like my colleague Alex Wang, who is an attorney working in our Beijing office, who probably could do this much better than I can, but I'm going to take a shot at it anyway. NRDC started 35 years ago when there were no environmental laws here in the United States. We don't remember even that far back that we didn't have a Clean Air Act, a Clean Water Act. We didn't have environmental laws. We had to create them. We have a lot of experience now in terms of those laws. Some work better than others, but it's a recent history in terms of what happened in terms of creating laws. And I think the lessons we learned in terms of what we did here in terms of protecting the environment, public participation, environmental impact statements, are all the things we can bring to the table in terms of lessons learned. What did we do right? How did we do them? And then we need to accelerate it. We need to do it not in 35 years, we need to do it in 5 years. We need to really make the change happen much, much faster. When I saw the title of this panel discussion was China Going Green with a question mark, it was, yeah, I mean, China is going green. The challenge is, and the problem is, that it, like China and the rest of the world, it's not going green fast enough. And again, given the China team we had a brochure prepared even before this panel was named. It was accelerating the greening of China, because we know that what we need to do is take what's going on and really accelerate it to meet the challenges that Joe was outlining. Because if you have this incredible economic growth going on, how do you have to almost green faster than your economic growth just to keep up. The good news is, because China is growing so rapidly, it can afford actually to make some of the investments you need to, because if it doesn't deal with its environmental problems, it won't be able to grow as fast as it is. The public health impacts in terms of air quality and water quality you know about, and China needs to address those issues. From NRDC's perspective, the opportunity really lies in technology. I mean, we believe that the technologies of today, not even things that haven't arrived, but technologies of today can help improve the way we use energy and water and resources. The word efficiency keeps coming up. The word efficiency is about doing more with less, which really means it's the right thing to do from an economic perspective and an environmental perspective.